ribs is what's for dinner.
That's right. All of this stuff here is going to be made into vegan ribs. So it starts off with jackfruit. And I don't mean like the ripe jackfruit that tastes like bubblegum. I mean green jackfruit. We get this one from Amazon. There'll be links in the description to be able to get this stuff. And it comes out looking like this. It's a little bit odd. And you can see there's seed pods in here. We want to get the seed pods out of it as best you can.
Basically, you gotta fondle your jackfruit.
So we went there. Okay. And I save those bits. There's a very good reason that I'll get to in a little while. But what you want to do is the top part here, see how it kind of shreds? That's what you want. And I'm dumping that right on top of one of the other ingredients, which is Vital Wheat gluten. How much Vital Wheat gluten?
1.5 cups.
1.5 cups of Vital Wheat gluten. Now, if you don't get all the seeds out, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. We just want these shreddable parts. We want to cut out the seed pods though. See that? They're a little big, they get in the way, but they're still going to be in this, just not the same way.
The reason why we're utilizing jackfruit in this particular recipe is because it has that lovely strand texture already. So that texture is going to go into our seitan, making it ribbalicious.
See this end piece? A little hard to shred. It doesn't shred. Put that in a bowl. And then repeat on the next piece. You just keep doing that through all the pieces of jackfruit. Oh, there's a big seed. See, that was a big one. It's going to be really boring to watch me do this. So I'm just going to go do all the jackfruit, and then we'll be back. Okay, that is possibly my least favorite part of making this, but when you're done, you should have a small amount of like the ends and the seed pods. Don't throw that away, that's useful. So, what's next on the list?
Well, we're on to the wet ingredients. We divide this recipe into dry and wet. Basically, dry is what's in that bowl right now on the far left. Or my far left, your far right.
This.
That one.
Which is 1.5 cups of Vital Wheat gluten and the shredded bits, whoops, missed one, of the jackfruit. So it's like the shreds and the Vital Wheat gluten, and that's it. Then next, oh wait, let me get rid of this.
So now we're going to use our food processor base and put all of our wet ingredients in there because when we're done, it's going to get processed.
Okay, so first I'm going to take all those bits and pieces of the jackfruit that we didn't put into the direct mix, and that goes into here. So that still is part of it. That's why you don't throw it away. There's no wastage here. All right, what's next?
Next is a teaspoon of MSG.
Okay, if you really don't want to use MSG, or you really just have a thing against flavor, use salt if you want to, but I've done the research and it's no more harmful than any other additive, but it does add a nice umami flavor.
Unless you have a particular aversion.
Yeah.
Medically or otherwise.
Sure, which that applies to anything here.
1 teaspoon garlic powder. 1 teaspoon onion powder. A 1/4 cup nutritional yeast. 1 tablespoon white wine vinegar.
Not white distilled. Use white wine vinegar. This is, for flavor. White distilled vinegar is just, ugh.
1/2 teaspoon of sesame oil.
This is the most fine-smelling thing you can ever have. It adds this lovely richness to the ribs that if you don't have it, I can understand not using it, but try to find some if you can.
We love sesame oil. It is a wonderful addition to so many recipes, not just ones that you may consider appropriate. And you really want to be careful with it though, because you can overpower the other flavors if you use too much.
Yeah. Here's the thing, sesame oil is not so much an oil as it's a seasoning.
Yeah.
So, treat it like that.
1.5 tablespoons of maple syrup, or...
if you don't have maple syrup, brown sugar. I have about 2 tablespoons of brown sugar here because it's a little more airy than maple syrup, so 2 tablespoons brown sugar, or 1.5 tablespoons of maple syrup. Either way, it's all good.
1 tablespoon ketchup.
If you don't want to use ketchup, you can use tomato paste. Though I think the little bit of extra sweetness and a little bit more vinegar and other things that comes in ketchup really adds to this flavor.
1 teaspoon pork flavoring.
Okay, this is a non-animal-based flavoring. It's like a bouillon. We get it from the Asian market. They make a chicken, a beef, and a pork. We love these things. They're really, really great. It does have a certain amount of sodium in it too, so you don't need to add as much salt when you're cooking with it.
3/4 cup water. Okay,
the water, I'm gonna add about half of it now and half of it as needed later when we start mixing this up. So I'm just gonna go about like that much or so.
1 teaspoon paprika.
You can use smoked paprika. You can use sweet paprika. This happens to be sweet. We didn't have any smoked.
You can even use fancy.
Yeah, this is fancy sweet paprika, actually. We're being technical.
1 teaspoon liquid smoke.
Love this stuff. This is the hickory flavor, but you can use whatever kind of liquid smoke you have. What was it, teaspoon?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a teaspoon.
And for color, a 1/2 teaspoon of beetroot powder.
You can leave this out if you really want to. It does add just a little bit of color, making these look a little bit more, I hate to say realistic, but, you know, appetizing. How's that?
And now we blend.
I'm gonna put a little bit more water in. But yeah, let me go put this on the base and blend this up. Be back in just a sec. Basically, you just wanna process until smooth. If you had to do this in a blender, you could totally do that. Food processor is just a little bit quicker, I think, for this particular purpose. Easier to get it out of. And then dump the wet onto the dry. Very technical process here. Try to scrape it all out because, you know, that's the good stuff. This is your flavor packet, if you will. So that's why we blend it all together. Makes for much easier mixing when we get to this step. And then mix it all together. Essentially, we have 3 ingredients here now. We have a liquid, we have our vital wheat gluten, and we have our jackfruit. We just want to bring them all together. If it feels like it's going to be too dry, that's why we have more water. I don't always need it. I just play with it a little bit and see how it goes. This is looking a little dry.
So while he's working on this process, it's a good idea to remind you to have your oven preheating.
350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is something Celsius right here. You also want to have a casserole dish handy. This happens to be like a 6x9, I think, or so. And that's about the size I like to do because we're going to be pressing it into that casserole dish. Now, this is looking a little bit dry. See, I can't get all the wet in there, so I'm just going to do like maybe an extra tablespoon of water or so just to wet it. You don't want this to be like dripping wet, but you don't want it to be too dry either. And we mix some more. Ideally, you want all this dry to come up, so I think I need more water. It's already starting to come together though. It's forming a mass. That's the gluten being activated in the vital wheat gluten.
It'll also start getting kind of springy and resist getting smooshed, and that means that it's working.
And at about this point is when you want to get out your best tool ever, and that is your hands. First, let me see if I can make this into the sink from here. All right, and I'm just gonna dump it out, trying to get all of the stuff out of the bowl. And then we knead it. Now, we're not really kneading this to oblivion like we do with some things. We're just trying to bring it all together. And I still have a couple of chunks here and there. Just fit everything in if you can. Do the best you can is what you want to do here. Get all the chunks in there.
It already smells good.
Yeah, it does. And that's the beauty of making seitan like this. You know, we can season it inside it as well as have a sauce on top. So you don't have to worry so much about, oh, this or that. Yeah, you can put it right into the recipe and it works really, really well. Okay, this has come together, so let's put that pan up here. And all I'm gonna do with all these pieces, I'm gonna put them in the bottom. Hey, we're not wasting anything here. This is a no waste kind of show. Yeah, I know it's falling apart. Don't worry about that. She's laughing at me just because she knows that I go through this every time I cook these things. And then I'm going to take the mass, stick it in there. Get all the bits and bobs and pieces, put them in there. And I'm just going to press it into this pan as best I can. And at this point you're going, but Bri, this looks like a mess. Yep, it really does. It does not look great when you put it in here. It's just kind of a messy blob with bits and pieces sticking out and weirdness everywhere. Well, it is.
You're selling it, babe.
But it comes out as the best seitan ribs I've ever had. But in here, it looks a little strange. I mean, it just does.
It's already starting to look.
Yeah, now it's starting to look.
Yeah, it's not as bad as he's making.
I just like to exaggerate for a comedic effect. It doesn't always work to my benefit. Remember that aforementioned oven at 350 degrees? We're almost ready to put this in there, but there's one more thing we got to do first. But first, I need to wash my hands. The last thing that you want to do before you put it in the oven is cut this into ribs, okay? I generally go about like that. Maybe that's 3/4 of an inch. And I'm just going to cut all the way through to the bottom. You don't have to be super precise about this, but you do want to cut. We're going to make this cut a few times, so just get it as good as you can. Don't be super concerned, but do the best you can.
It may seem a little weird to be cutting it at this point. You haven't even cooked it. It's basically raw.
Yep.
But Brian has found through experience that this is really a good time to start this process, and you'll regret it if you don't.
It helps to cook them a little more thoroughly. It also helps the next step to seep in. Well, not the next step, but the next ingredient to seep in. We'll get to that soon. What we're also doing is breaking through some of the fibers in the jackfruit so that when you try to remove this from the pan later, it doesn't make a complete mess. Because, this stuff isn't... Seitan can be very tough at times and very bouncy and chewy. This one is not that way. It's actually made to mimic ribs, which means fall off the bone style ribs, The cutting is not easy. I will tell you that right now. It's not, because you're cutting like this rubbery thing. It's actually difficult. But you just want to get it started. And then into the oven for 20 minutes. By the way, if you use a different size pan, you want to make sure that you're not more than, say, an inch thick, okay? So whatever size pan you end up using, don't go more than an inch thick. Don't go narrower than that either. You want it to be about like that so that it'll cook properly at the temperatures and the times that I'm talking about. So 20 minutes, see you then. After 20 minutes, you take them out of the oven. You can see they raised a little bit, not too much, but what we want to do now is begin the barbecue sauce. Now, for barbecue sauce, you can use your favorite barbecue sauce, of course, or we happened to put out a video just last week about how to make this barbecue sauce that I have right here. Tastes a lot like Sweet Baby Ray's, if you're familiar with that. And what I want to do is just take like maybe half a cup or so and spread it over the top. This does a couple things, and you'll also understand why I cut. See, when you cut, you make openings for flavor to get in, but it also keeps everything nice and moist on top so nothing gets overly cooked, also known as burnt. And what I'm going to do, once I have this covered, is I'm going to just go over those cuts one more time to make sure that some of that flavor gets down the sides.
He's not really pushing, he's more spreading.
Just spreading. Just a very light layer on the top. I want to save the rest for dipping in later. Let me get a knife. And just like before, I'm just going to lightly go over the areas that were already cut and just make sure it's cut all the way to the sides. We don't want to shred it at all. Just want to go through the same cuts that you did before.
And doing this step after you add the first amount of barbecue sauce is going to help get that barbecue sauce down in between those layers even more.
Oh yeah. Because, ribs, barbecue sauce, kind of a thing. I will sometimes too just kind of push the edges around so that nothing's sticking. They're more likely to stick once the barbecue sauce has been applied, but I just want to clear them from the sides. Let's a little bit get down the edge too. Nothing wrong with a little extra char in there. It's all good. But at this point, they are not cooked, okay? So don't think that this is done yet. They're gonna go back in the oven at 350 degrees for about 45 more minutes. So I'm gonna go do that and we'll see you then. It's been 45 minutes. Our ribs, they are cooked. So now I'm gonna take a little spatula and remember those cut lines that I made? I'm gonna make sure it's really cut. Ideally, you wanna let these cool for a while. We're not doing that today. The first time I made them, I didn't do it either, and they worked out just fine. But if you let them cool, the texture can actually improve a little bit. These are sticking ever so slightly. There we go. They're coming. They're coming. They're coming. There's one. It never fails. I can pull these things out every day, no problem. Try doing it on camera. Nah, it never works right. All right, there we go. At this point, what you have is a rib with some barbecue sauce on it, but not a lot of barbecue sauce on it. I like a lot of barbecue sauce on my ribs, so it's time to add some.
Non più tra I farfalloni amoroso, notte giorno di torno girano, delle belle turbando al riposo, Narcisetto a dolcino d'amor, delle belle turbando al riposo, Narcisetto a dolcino d'amor.
All right, we plated these ribs with a little bit of mac and cheese that's coming out on Wednesday. So if you want to learn how to make vegan mac and cheese, you want to watch that. But for now, this is all about the ribs. You can cut them with a fork. It takes a little doing because they have some texture. And normally I would have Derica try this first, and I'm still going to continue that tradition. So there you go, baby.
Thank you. But look, it's staying together. It is a solid mass. It has the texture of ribs. Just trust us on this.
Well, you have to do it. Yeah, these came out great.
But they're so rich and moist. Just like the perfect fall off the bone style rib.
Yeah, there's that little bit of a bounce that you get with meat that's in there. And that's the seitan does that. But then it has like a little bit of a shreddability. Like you can see little pieces coming up. That comes from the jackfruit. You don't taste jackfruit. You taste barbecue. I mean, really, if you miss barbecue on a plant-based diet, this is definitely the way to go.
It is so close to a meat replicant.
You could probably fool some people with this. If we didn't tell them, you could probably fool some people with this. But anyway, go make some barbecue and watch in a couple days for the mac and cheese. And if you want to learn how to make the barbecue sauce, we did that one like last week. Go make that too. And in the meantime, as always, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.
Bye-bye.